This place had always felt like home to me, a sanctuary where I could escape the noise of the world. But lately something was off. I grabbed my gear, including the small camera I intended to set up. The new wolf pack had been causing a stir. Livestock was disappearing, and the townsfolk were growing restless. I needed to understand what was going on before they took matters into their own hands. With a few clicks, I set the camera in a tree, angling it toward a worn path I'd seen the wolves use. As I stepped back, I heard a rustle in the underbrush. My heart raced, but when I turned, nothing was there, just the wind whispering through the branches. I shook it off and drove back to town, the unease settling in my gut. The diner was buzzing with patrons as I walked in. They paused, eyes narrowing, whispers trailing behind me like shadows. "Look who's back," one of them sneered. "Mr. Nature Boy." "Just doing my job," I replied, taking a seat at the counter. "You mean your hobby?" Another voice chimed in, laughter echoing in the cramped space. I ignored them, focusing on my coffee. The scent of bacon and grease filled the air, a stark contrast to the tension that hung around me. "What's going on with the wolves?" I finally asked the group. "The sheriff says we should take them out," a burly man replied, slamming his fist on the table. "They're dangerous." "Dangerous?" I scoffed. "They're just animals trying to survive. Not when they're hunting our livestock." "We've lost too much already," the man shot back, his voice rising. I knew I had to act quickly. If the townsfolk decided to hunt the wolves, it could lead to a massacre. I stood up, leaving a few crumpled bills on the counter. "Where are you going?" Someone called after me. "To find the truth," I muttered, stepping outside into the cool night. Back at my cabin, I plugged the camera into my laptop, anticipation racing through me. The screen flickered and I leaned closer. What I saw sent chills down my spine. The video showed the sheriff transforming under the light of the full moon, his body contorting as fur sprouted from his skin. "No way," I whispered, disbelief washing over me. I had to tell someone. The townsfolk needed to know the truth. As I grabbed my keys, I heard a noise outside, a low growl followed by a rustling sound. I paused, my heart pounding, but I forced myself to step out. The night was silent again, but unease crept in like fog. I hurried to my truck, my mind racing. The sheriff was one of them. He was a werewolf, and if the pack was anything like him, the danger was greater than I'd imagined. The engine roared to life and I sped through the town, the street lamps flickering overhead. I had to get to the diner to rally the townsfolk with proof. Suddenly a figure stepped into the road. It was Deputy Harris, arms crossed, blocking my path. "Hold it right there, Donald," he said, his voice low and steady. "Get out of the way, Harris," I shouted, my grip tightening on the wheel. He approached slowly, almost casually, as if he didn't have a care in the world. "I think you need to step out of the vehicle," he insisted, and I could see the glint of something in his eyes. I hesitated, then swung the door open. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded. "Because you're a problem," he said, pulling the camera from my hands. "Hey, you can't—" Before I could finish, he pressed a button, and the screen went black. "Don't worry. No one will believe you now." His eyes met mine, and I felt the blood drain from my face. He was one of them, too. "Get back in your truck, Donald," he ordered, a smirk creeping onto his lips. I opened my mouth to scream, but the laughter of the townsfolk echoed around me. They had gathered, watching the scene unfold, and all I could hear were their mocking chuckles. "Crazy Donald, scared of his own shadow," someone jeered. "Leave him alone," I shouted, desperation clawing at my throat, but they only laughed harder. "Time to go," Harris said, his tone final. I climbed back into the truck, heart racing, and sped out of town. Panic coursed through my veins. I had to gather a team, someone who would believe me. The next morning, I reached out to some old friends from the military, seasoned hunters who knew how to face the impossible. When I explained the situation, some laughed, others showed concern, but I convinced a few to join me. We met at a rundown bar on the edge of town, a place where the locals wouldn't bother us. "Werewolves, really?" One of them snorted, shaking his head. "Look, I know it sounds crazy, but I've seen it," I insisted, my voice firm. "We can't let them kill more innocent animals, or worse." As the sun set, we drove back toward the town, the air thick with tension. "I still think this is a joke," one hunter muttered. But the others were silent, watching the road. When we arrived, the streets were eerily quiet. The diner's lights flickered, but no one was inside. "Something's not right," I said, scanning the area. Then we saw it, the blood. It was smeared across the pavement, trails leading into the shadows. Holy hell, one of the hunters whispered. Let's find a safe place, I urged. We ducked into an abandoned warehouse, the air stale and thick with dust. Do we really think we can take them on? One of my friends questioned, doubt creeping into his voice. It's either us or them, I replied, determination fueling my words. We set up a perimeter, placing traps and weapons around the building. Adrenaline surging through us. As darkness fell, the howls echoed through the night, chilling, primal and hungry. They're coming, I warned, gripping my rifle tightly. The first wave hit like a storm. The door burst open and chaos ensued. Watch out! Someone screamed as a dark shape lunged at us. I fired, the shot ringing through the air followed by a howl of pain. Get back! I shouted, trying to rally my team, but the wolves were relentless, their eyes glowing with hunger. We fought back, but one by one my friends fell, taken by the beasts. The stench of blood filled the air, mingling with the screams and growls. Donald, help! One of them cried as he was dragged into the darkness. I pressed on, my heart pounding, but desperation clawed at me. I couldn't let their sacrifice be in vain. Finally, it was just me. I stumbled back, gasping for breath. The warehouse now silent except for the distant howls. I was alone. I had survived, but at what cost? Sinking to the ground, I felt the weight of the night pressing down on me. I had come to protect the town, to save the wolves, but instead, I had witnessed the horror hidden beneath the surface. As the first light broke over the horizon, I stood up, adrenaline fading into exhaustion. I had to leave this place behind, to forget the laughter that had mocked me, the blood that had stained the streets. I walked out of the warehouse, the sun casting long shadows as I made my way to my truck. The town was empty, a ghost of what it had once been. With one last glance at the forest, I drove away, the memories haunting me like the howls in the night. Surviving was all that mattered now,